What a surprise. We ended up bouncing like I said we would. What a surprise. All right. In today's video, we're going to take a look at what the next steps are in the market. All right. We're going to take a look at the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Russell, all the large tech stocks, all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's get started with the video. All right. First and foremost, I was saying yesterday that the SPY, this is a daily chart of the SPY, it would bounce to at least 508.50, 509. What ended up happening? What ended up happening? We ended up going all the way to 512. The reason why I was saying we would bounce was a lot of bullish there was a lot of bullish factors that I talked about in yesterday's video, and it was just setting up for a beautiful little bounce. I was bullish yesterday. I was bullish into today. I also mentioned that we would be bullish and rise into Powell's speech. That's what ended up happening. And yeah, I just love it when a plan comes together. So now, pragmatically speaking, what are the next steps? So number one, Powell testifies again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and then another Fed member speaks at 11:30 a.m. Number two, Apple is trading outside of the lower bands. This is the third day in a row that Apple is opening and closing outside of the lower level of the Bollinger Band. And generally, when this happens in history, we end up bouncing. So we are currently long on Apple. This generally should be bouncing after a large move to the downside. It's not the time to start leaning short, right? Because the risk reward is much lower, right? It's a much better time to lean long. So that is currently my thought process. And what that means for the overall market is that if Apple should be bouncing, right? Not just Apple bouncing. If Apple should be bouncing, that should be bullish for the market. My third reason, sorry, I misspoke. My third thing that we have to look at in the market are the chips. So NVIDIA and AMD are basically pumping into new all-time highs. And with NVIDIA and AMD pumping into new all-time highs, with Apple at a point where it should be bouncing, right? This begs the question, is the overall market going to continue bouncing as well? So, especially given the fact that Google is also starting to show a bit of a bottoming out. But the main concern is, will this strength in the S&P continue? In my opinion, the only way that... So, first and foremost, this is starting to look like a very, very toppy formation. This is not a... Even if we were to... So once again, yesterday I was talking about how we could end up hitting 518, right? This sort of setup generally is always a very toppy formation. In the next few days, overall, yes, the market should be bouncing. We could, based off of Apple, get a pull upwards into the rest of the tech stocks, because AI chip-related stocks are basically rally. But if Apple can start pulling its weight, it will most likely help the rest of the tech stock. The market is doing this while the market is still basically at 510. The SPY is around 510. Yet Apple, one of the largest tech companies, is basically in free fall. Google is also basically getting beaten. So with these two large stocks getting decimated, essentially, and Microsoft, well, today had a big move to the downside. So with these stocks basically getting decimated, right? The SPY is still relatively pretty high. So that essentially begs the question. If Apple, Google, if the losers ends up bouncing, what effect will that end up happening with the market? And it all depends essentially on NVIDIA and AMD. So if NVIDIA and AMD can continue to, if they could just consolidate, they don't need to continue rising. They just need to consolidate. We just need to hold around this 820 to 860 area on NVIDIA, while Apple and Google and the others bounce. That would give enough room for the SPY to, bounce. Okay. That would give enough strength for the SPY to bounce back above 512 and then potentially into new highs. All the while, after Apple and the others bounce, NVIDIA and AMD can continue. So, that's essentially my thought process. I was, obviously we were also bullish on. I was bullish on the overall market overnight, and this, if they want to bounce it, they have to try to bounce it off of a setup like this. Because if they fail to bounce it off of this, then it's going to crack much, much lower. And that's just my opinion, the way that the setup and everything is situated. We also have, on March 15th, we have monthly options expiration. So overall, I think that we should be bullish heading into that March 15th day. I would be surprised to see if we start really capitulating. But if we end up continuing to rise higher and higher and higher into March 15th, the end of March and April we should get a pullback in the market. So, like I've been saying, I believe that the SPY should be touching 480, 490 sometime probably by the end of April. And if we continue rising for the first 2 weeks of March, then it's a good time to enter into shorts, in my opinion. So we're going to take a look at that, obviously, when the time comes. But yeah, for now, we're just letting the market do its thing, and we're continuing to play the market on both sides. And yeah, really, it's all just going to be very, very dependent on Fed Powell's speech tomorrow and the big loser tech stocks. So you see Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Tesla all basically at lows. They're trading. Tesla is getting close to 170, and that could be a 168, 170 is a good spot for Tesla to basically enter long. We could end up seeing that. Tesla was one of the biggest losers today in terms of tech stocks as well. And if Apple gets another crack lower, maybe to 166, 167, we could also see maybe bounce upwards. But one of the most important things is that this is the third day that Apple is opening and closing outside of the lower bands. That denotes extreme overextensions to the downside, and generally always banks and hedge funds buy into this extreme weakness. It is much, much, much easier to play along on the long side than it is to short institutional pressure. So we would be getting institutional buying help to go long over here on Apple. If Apple was at highs and it was pushing upwards, up on the Bollinger Bands like this, it's much more difficult to short over here than it is to go long down here, because banks and hedge funds, there's some hedge funds that only go long. And of course, like, historically, we tend to always bounce within 2 months on Apple. Oftentimes it happens much faster, but my point still stands. I'm bullish on Apple. There's still more room to go to the downside on a few of these stocks, but overall, if Apple ends up bouncing and the chips end up consolidating, then that could lead to the SPY to around at least 515, 516. It's currently trading at 510. We had a high today of 512. So that is my thought process for the overall market. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please make sure to show support. And yeah, love you guys. Hope to see you guys tomorrow as well. Take care. Have a good one.